Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Technical Officer Industry Platforms, Tom Eck.
All right, all right, all right. How we doing? First of all, thank you for coming here this evening. I know it's probably been another long day. I hope you're having a great time at this awesome conference. And I probably stand between you, drinks, chain smokers, and other assorted festivities that go on at Vegas. So yeah, so again, Tom Eck, Industry Platforms. So obviously, what I do is I work on building platforms for different industries. And today I'm going to be specifically talking about financial services. But if you're not in financial services, that's fine, because a lot of what I will be addressing also goes across industries as well. So I'm going to be talking about the art of the possible as well as the art of the actual. I just heard that phrase today, the art of the actual, so I'm stealing that. And what I mean by that is I'm going to be taking us through somewhat of some theory, but I'm going to quickly get down to very practical. This is going to be a very practical talk with very actionable steps that you can start taking on the journey that I'm going to take you on to open banking. So the attorneys told me I had to put 15 slides of disclaimers, and I negotiated down to one. So let me tell you what this talk is going to be about, okay? The topic is really about open banking and platforms. And I'm going to start by giving a definition of open banking. I'll contrast it with closed banking, and then talk about why I believe that platforms are the way forward, both from a commercial sense and from a technology sense for the future of financial services. And I'm not just going to frame a problem, I'm also going to give you an opinionated solution and some, as I said before, actionable steps on how to get started. So at the end of this, I hope that you've learned a little bit about open banking and can start thinking about how it might apply in your company. So let's start with some definitions. So open banking. So it's a term that's used in financial services, referring to the use of open APIs that enable third-party developers to build apps and services around a financial institution. What's interesting is this is not exactly a brand new idea. In fact, the idea of open innovation started in the mid-2000s, 2005, 2006. It was popularized in this book, which was published by Harvard Press. And the book presented a 6-stage business maturity model that culminated in a platform innovation model where external, and this is the great part, where external parties commit capital in support of and alongside your own activities, okay? So they're doing your work, they're doing work for you that you don't have to pay them for. And sounds too good to be true? No, this is real, and I'm going to show you how you're going to do it yourself. So in simple terms, to unpack a little bit more about open banking, I think that there's 3 aspects to it, okay? One is, again, enabling third-party integrations. So when we talk about integrations, we're talking about technology. If we're talking about technology and integrations, we're talking about developers. I am a developer, so a lot of this resonates with me, and I have a lot of passion for openness, open banking, open APIs, and platforms. The second part of open banking is consumer related. And I'm going to get into some of the drivers of open banking, which are somewhat driven by regulation. And one of those regulations drives greater financial transparency for consumers. So today, banks mostly have control of your data, right? Of your payments, of your balance, and other types of information. And as I'll mention in a couple of slides, there are regions in the world that are mandating that banks give greater access to that data to registered third parties, and that is for the benefit of the consumer. And I'll get into that. And the third aspect of open banking is using open source technologies. And there are several frameworks that are available to kind of guide us in thinking about open banking. The 2 that I have pointed out here on this slide, One is Beyond Banking Industry Architecture Network. IBM sits on the board of that committee. And the idea there is to kind of do a functional decomposition of the financial services industry into different business domains. So much in the way that we would tackle a complex problem and break it, decompose it into more bite-sized pieces. That's what this framework does. And we use that ourselves as kind of a map of the world to help us think about the different parts of the financial services industry and how we might prioritize going after different pieces of it. So let's talk about drivers of open banking. So we'll start with regulation. So in 2015, the European Parliament basically regulated a new regulation called PSD2, Payment Services Directive 2, and that requires banks to give access to registered third parties to bank account information. So that's account balance and transactions. So being able to initiate a payment transaction and to look at transaction history. Now, of course, that is only with the consumer's consent. And the reason for this is to drive innovation, okay? And so this is where instant payments are really getting popular. It's really started in Europe, but it's starting to spread into other regions of the world as well. So that's one of the drivers is regulation. And another driver is competition. So some fintechs and some forward-thinking financial institutions are already starting to open up access to their platforms through APIs, and that is definitely giving them a competitive advantage. So to remain competitive, we would advise that you do so as well. So that's the competition part, but opportunity. There's lots of opportunity here for, I'm going to explain a few things here, increasing collaboration and partnership opportunities. So the easier we make it to integrate with each other, the better, more partnerships we can have. We can start building ecosystems, and I'll talk a little bit about the power of ecosystems, but definitely it's a lot about collaboration. It's also about faster time to market, because there's some really great assets out there that third parties are building and that maybe you're building that I can use, and you've already written it, you've exposed it through a nice, modern, lightweight API. I can integrate it very quickly. I don't have to roll that myself now, so I can much more quickly get applications and product into market. It also allows me to very easily augment services that I have. So for example, it's very easy to integrate with our Watson APIs. So if you want to augment some product that you have with maybe some natural language understanding or some other type of machine learning, that's all just an API call away. So this is really, this is a huge inflection point that we're at right now that is making software easier to build and driving these partnerships. And as I'll get to in the next slide, it's really platforms that are enabling this to happen. And the final thing is monetization opportunities. So there's opening of new digital channels. So that's part of what open banking is giving us. So think about the voice interfaces. Think about payments from wearables, payments from car. I say anything that can talk HTTP should be able to initiate a payment, right? So what about data? So there's lots of dark data that we're all sitting on, which is a great thing that we've held on to it for the day that we could figure out how to harness it, and today's the day to do it. So now here's brand new revenue streams that we can make available very easily accessible through APIs again. And a lot of this is about friction and frictionlessness. So by adopting these open APIs and standards, we make it very easy for the exchange of value that we are exposing. So if there's open banking, then there must be closed banking. I don't know if this is really a term, but play along with me. So what does closed banking look like? We probably all have experienced this. We might be experiencing it today. We might have a mix of this. But to me, closed banking is you have great assets, you have services, you have data, and they're all locked away in a prison behind a firewall, behind proprietary interfaces, heavyweight protocols. Some of you probably remember, some of the ISO specifications or even SOAP and SAML. These were fine, but nobody in their right mind is going to use those from a mobile app, right? Or from a voice interface. They're just too heavyweight. So if you're still, you exposing only these kind of heavier protocols and interfaces, there's more friction there for partners and third parties to integrate with you. And the last one I might want to mention here is about composability. And that is one of the ways that we get great acceleration nowadays in building assets, by composition of APIs. So on IBM Cloud, we have a marketplace with some of our own APIs, and many fintechs now, including our friends I see in the audience here from Accrete, RiskSpan, Acern. I'll give a shout out to a few of you guys there. We love you guys being there because you're bringing some awesome capabilities into our ecosystem that we can help our clients integrate with, and we have great tools to make that happen on our cloud. We have a number of starter kits, which are completely functional, full source code projects in your favorite language, your favorite stack, that a developer can download, can compile and run within 5 minutes, and you can see some really incredibly powerful capabilities that are just a 2-minute integration away. And if you don't believe me, try it yourself. And we're going to give you the coordinates of how you can do that at the end of this talk. So closed banking, you don't have the benefit of composition. Okay, so that's open versus closed banking. So before I get to the solution, I have to introduce one more term here, and that is platform. So this is another overused term. Everybody probably has their own definition. So for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to define it very simply as an environment that facilitates the exchange of value between producers and consumers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain it in the terms of what most of us have in our pocket right now, which is one of the greatest platforms ever built, and it is the iPhone. So here's a quick quiz question. What is the purpose of the iPhone platform? What does the iPhone platform do? What is it for? Is for making phone calls? I don't know about that. I think it's a platform for running mobile applications. That's what the iPhone is. And let's break that down in terms of the components of what makes that a platform. So first of all, for a platform, you need some type of substrate. You need some type of runtime that powers the platform. So I would contend that the runtime for the iPhone is the iOS operating system, okay? Okay, that's my runtime platform. Secondly, I need a mechanism for extension. So I need to empower and enable third parties to be able to add value onto the platform. So what does that mean? It means I have software development kits, I have documentation, I have developer support, I have developer conferences that all assist third parties in building apps that run on this platform. Now, why would a developer, let's say a third-party developer, spend her time building an application for a platform? Well, unless you're doing it for the benefit of humanity, which is great, but I happen to be a capitalist, so I'd like to be able to pay my bills, I need to get an exchange of value. So the value that I'm bringing onto the platform is an application, and what I want back is cold, hard dollars. So we need a marketplace, right? We need a marketplace that is the facilitator of that exchange of value. So that's the third key aspect of a platform. And then finally, the ecosystem. And this is probably the hardest part. So even if you have all three of those components that I mentioned, it does not guarantee that you are going to have a successful platform. Trust me, I have been there, and it doesn't feel good when that happens. So do not build the field of dreams. You need to have a plan for how you are going to attract both producers and consumers to that platform, okay? So it's almost like a chicken and egg thing. I remember when I was in my earlier days doing software development, it was Windows and it was Mac OS. And Again, because I had to pay my college bills back, I had to figure out which one was going to make more money. So it happened to be Windows because it had more customers. So I built software that ran on Windows, which attracted more buyers of Windows, right? Which then attracted more developers. And that's what you need to get. You need to get into that cycle of attracting consumers and producers. And that's where you get the, basically, what I call the platform effect. And that's really the nirvana that you're looking for here. And then I'll just mention that there's a couple other non-functional characteristics of a platform, and that is scalability, extensibility. Metcalfe's law kicks in here. This is this exponential, the value of a platform increases exponentially with the number of participants in it, okay? And then one of my favorite aspects of a platform is emergent behavior. So Twitter is another platform, of course, and I'm always intrigued by the fact that the hashtag was not invented by Twitter, okay? The hashtag was invented by somebody in Silicon Valley who was using Twitter and was frustrated by not being able to keep track of messages that were like related, what we would call thread. And he discovered that the pound symbol, the hashtag, was a legal character in Twitter, and he and his friends started adopting it for that purpose, and all of a sudden, now it became this thing, right? So that's an emergent behavior. I love those kind of things, and that's part of what a platform can drive. So I spoke about the iPhone as being a platform. Uber is another platform. The difference here that I like to point out is that the iPhone is a purely technology platform. Uber uses technology to facilitate the platform, but Uber is really a platform for matching riders and drivers. And if you think about what I mentioned before about needing to get this right mix of producers and consumers, think about the problem Uber has. If they have too many drivers and not enough riders, the drivers are going to get frustrated because they're all competing for the same riders, and they're going to be wasting their time, and they're going to go to Lyft or go do something else. Flip it around the other way, which you might have experienced here in Vegas, when there's too many riders and not enough drivers, the riders get frustrated because they can't get a ride. So, Uber plays around with surge pricing and things like that. But these are things to keep in mind. That my point here is that platforms are not just technology. There's this whole ecosystem dynamic that you need to take into account as well. Okay, so we've talked about open banking. We've talked about platforms. Now let's put it together and talk about an open banking platform. So this is just the same definition that I gave before on what a platform is, but now let's cast it in the environment of a open banking platform. So in an open banking platform, what is the environment? So it's typically a PaaS, right? A platform as a service, such as IBM Cloud, with software development tools, right, that make it easy for developers to build assets that run on that platform. So that's the environment. It also needs an exchange. So what we have is we have our fintech marketplace, and in that marketplace today, it consists of APIs and some data services. But I envision that any digital asset that we can figure out how to package, meter, and deploy belongs in this type of marketplace. So that can include trained neural networks, for example. It could include blockchain code, smart contracts. Okay, so that's the exchange is through this marketplace. And then who are the producers and the consumers? Well, this is a two-sided marketplace, right? And depending on your need, you could be a producer or you could be a consumer, and you can flip positions at any time. So think about Uber. Many times, people who became Uber drivers, but they were first Uber riders. And maybe some days they are riders and some days they're drivers. So my point here is that you can both be a producer, so you could be putting your APIs into a marketplace, as well as being a consumer where you're consuming IBM APIs and some of our third-party APIs as well. So those are just a very high-level definition of what an open banking platform is. And I'm going to go much deeper into what an architecture would look like. So how do we go from a closed banking to an open banking platform? So we think what's really critical here are two concepts here. One is what we call core to cloud. Easy to say, not so easy to do. That literally means having a connection from the externally facing, nice, modern, RESTful API all the way down into that grungy, hard-working payment platform that runs your business, and making that connection all the way through. And in order to do that, you must solve the last mile problem. There are lots of vendors that are solving, I guess maybe we call it the first mile problem, which is exposing an API. I think that's a lot more straightforward than solving that last mile where you actually have to connect to a legacy platform, possibly using some of these heavier weight protocols that I mentioned before. And the third part is about acceleration. Okay, so we want to help you accelerate this digital transformation from a closed to an open banking platform. So there's three core concepts, again, that we want to mention here. So first of all, I did not say that what we want to do is rip and replace. So it's been tried. It may work in certain cases. I think it's kind of like changing the tires on a car doing 85 miles an hour on the New Jersey Turnpike. I wouldn't recommend it. Maybe you can do it. But the tack that we're taking instead is leave the legacy platforms where they are for now. And instead, we are going to put a layer on top that is going to kind of act as a time machine. It's going to translate from the legacy era into a modern, container-based microservice architecture, API-ified layer, so that now your core platforms are now being surfaced as microservices. Once we have them there, we can compose them into different workflows and then expose them as APIs. And I'll show you an architecture diagram of how we do that. And another key aspect here is that what we are building here is a product. Okay, this is not about a bespoke implementation. This is about a product that perhaps might have 30% of this bridging from closed to open in the box already, and so therefore you're not starting really from a blank whiteboard. Okay, and this is all about acceleration. So this is a really high-level overview of what the architecture looks like. And again, I just have to caveat this by saying this is something we're building in the labs. I can't comment on when or if it will be available, but this is the embodiment of what I just discussed. So we think of it like this. At the bottom there are your core systems, okay? And then atop of that is this integration layer, which I'm a big fan of Kubernetes. So you might have heard that we have a great platform called IBM Cloud Private, which is a great implementation of Kubernetes. So we are leveraging IBM Cloud Private, and so we have I guess you call it like a foundation layer first that sits on top of IBM Cloud Private, and that takes care of kind of all the security, orchestration, data governance, workflow, kind of all of that non-differentiating, framework that you need to power a modern microservice-based platform. But where it gets really interesting are these vertical packs that you see in these kind of vertical swim lanes. And that's where the business functionality is. So on the left side, you see like a payment pack. So what would be inside of a payment pack? Well, it would be at the top, it's those modern APIs. So if we're doing instant payments in Europe, these would be PSD2. If you want to define your own APIs, these would be your APIs. And then remember, though, it needs to get connected to that legacy platform at the bottom. And that's kind of where this magic is of what we're building in a very extensible, very high throughput, very scalable manner. And we're taking a very incremental approach as well. So I would recommend that you think about a business case that's very important for you to, an opportunity, let's say, for leverage for exposing data or for exposing one of your closed platforms today. Payments is a very popular one. We think lending is another very important one that's coming along as well. But kind of pick these golden threads to go all the way from core to cloud, and start with one or two of those and then move horizontally across. And as time goes on, we will be releasing more and more of these packs. And I also want to mention that this is also where our fintech ecosystem comes into play, okay? So we talked about getting so if you're an FI, you're exposing APIs. We would love to talk to you about getting your services into this platform that I'm showing here, as well as we'll be leveraging our third-party partners too. So let me give you an example. So with microservices, by definition, each microservice does a tiny bit of work, and usually it's not enough to execute a complete business process. So let's say the business process is account opening, and let's say that the workflow to do that involves KYC, AML, maybe there's an optional step that does a social media check or checks some other type of alternative data source. And then finally, you need to talk to the core platform and do the actual account provisioning. So each of those steps is kind of a placeholder that during configuration, you will define where is the code that executes that step. So let's start with KYC. So you might have your own KYC platform that you want to use. Okay, great, we'll wire it in. Or do you want to use one, maybe some enhanced KYC API that one of our third-party provider exposes through our marketplace? So kind of in a drag and drop, you're able to bring components that you've created, that third parties have created, that IBM has created, and again, this is through that composition effect, very quickly build these workflows, okay? So if you think about what we're doing is we're taking these monolithic applications, we're deconstructing them into microservices, and then we're reconstructing them into business processes that then get surfaced as lightweight APIs. So this is what we're building in the labs right now. So how do we get you engaged in this process? We'd like to start talking to you about this now, and we actually have a process. This is the same type of process that we use for blockchain, which has been very successful. So we recommend this type of flow. So I can't do any justice to what we're building in a forum like this. I'd love to come and sit with you for half a day or so. We can go into kind of a deeper briefing. Maybe you could bring some technical folks. We could show you the technical architecture, bring some line of business folks, and start thinking about how this might fit into your strategy. So assuming that goes well, we would then set up a 1 or a 2 day workshop where we would actually start whiteboarding. You tell us what are some of the most important services you like to expose, or problems or challenges or opportunities that you see that this could help with. And we would kind of iterate through that and say, well, that one might be a little bit too big to bite off right now. What else do you have? But the idea would be we would come out of this session with maybe 1 or 2 ideas of projects that could be achieved in a 8 to 12 week engagement. And I would pick something that is meaningful, right? We don't want to do a hello world, but it should be meaningful and it should be tractable. With a pretty high level of confidence that we could get it completed. Like, don't try to put a man on the sun or anything like that. Just let's pick something. The purpose is that we get to understand your problem space. You get to understand our technology. And we start doing this in an iterative, agile fashion. And then hopefully, the result of this is that you become comfortable with our platform, and we actually talk about putting it in production. I should mention one thing I forgot to say, going back to the fact that this is all container technology that we're using. And I mentioned IBM Cloud Private. That's part of our hybrid philosophy. So this gives you ultimate optionality in where you run your workloads, right? So you're not making a decision up front that you are then bound to, in perpetuity. So if you're more comfortable running certain workloads on-prem because it's dealing with PII or other sensitive data, that's great. You can run it on IBM Cloud Private, run it on-prem. You might then decide that we can get better efficiencies if we start moving some of these workloads to the public cloud, and we just move those containers to the IBM Container Service, right? And we can mix and match. So lots of optionality there. Which I think is very important. We also run containers on our mainframes as well. So we really kind of have that unique capability. So why do this with IBM? So we think that we are the right partner for this for a number of reasons. One is that we are already, we're very knowledgeable, obviously, in this financial services space. We're very knowledgeable with your technology. And we are forming this ecosystem kind of as a service to you. So it's a very time-consuming, intensive activity to recruit the best fintechs out there because there are so many. So as a service to you, we are providing a curated marketplace. And if you go onto our Cloud for Financial Services, you will see an ever-growing list of assets that are in there, both from IBM as well as from our third parties. And very high-quality documentation. You can instantly experiment with the APIs in your browser, for example, and they're all high quality. So that's another reason to go with us. And the third thing is really about acceleration. And that's why I wanted to mention that what we are building here is a product, right? It's the foundation around which we will help you accelerate your digital transformation in this very kind of iterative and opinionated fashion. So that I just think it's a lot easier to have a straw man of an architecture, a straw man of a product that we can then start discussing, rather than all showing up in a room with a blank whiteboard. I think this just accelerates getting time to market. So what can you do next? The immediate next actions, I would take a snapshot or write down that URL there. That's where you can actually take a look at this catalog of the assets that we have. And view our starter kits as well. These are these prepackaged, fully worked source code projects. Your developers could be up and running on them literally in 5 minutes. They can download the code, they can run it locally, they can use our DevOps tool chains, deploy it to IBM Cloud, literally in minutes, okay? And then shoot us an email, and we can start getting scheduled perhaps some of these initial engagements. We'd love to come and talk to you in kind of a more focused meetings and figure out some next steps from there. So in conclusion, I hope that kind of gave you a little feel for what is going on in open banking and platforms. Again, I think platforms are going to transform financial services along with other industries. And it's not just about the technology. So when you're doing a transformation and you're using platforms, there's multiple other complexities that you have to deal with. A couple that I'll mention very quickly. One of them is culture. So you're going to, one of the strongest forces in the universe is inertia. And I think we all know that it's very hard to convince people to change because it's already working, right? It's already working. But the horse and carriage was working for a really long time too, right? So times change, and one of the forcing actions here are the fintechs are not slowing down, right? So there is a forcing action there to move faster, but we have to do it in a controlled way that we don't break the bank, literally, right? So we have to find that right balance, that right risk tolerance, and you have to have the right people. So that's the second thing I'd point out here is talent. Talent is, I think, really underestimated as a key component of success in moving to a modern platform approach. different skill sets are involved. You have DevOps. You have building a microservice application. You can build a really, really horrible microservice architecture application that's way worse than a monolith in many ways if you don't do it correctly. So we have the expertise that we can help you not only with guide you on the architecture, but we also can help you stand up agile development teams. If you're introducing agile into your organization, we can help you with that. And especially in some of the larger institutions, spinning up a couple of agile teams, it's somewhat straightforward. To me, it's mostly common sense, by the way, agile. But it gets a little bit more difficult when you try to spin it up in an institution the size of a large bank or of an IBM. So we are doing this, we live this, and we would be happy to help you with this that as part of the journey as well. So my time is up. I think I really appreciate you all coming out and listening to this. We don't have time for questions, but I'll be hanging around a little bit, and enjoy the rest of the evening, and go enjoy the concerts and the rest of the conference. Thanks you very much.